just agree some dates when things will be done by, just so that can inform us for preparing our post-hearings advisory letter.
Okay, so right. So in terms, so we're going through everything that we've kind of mopped up from last week as well.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
That'll be useful. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So discussion with LUC as regards the sustainability appraisal and the need for it to refer to the SAMLAR process. Noreen, can you enlighten me as to when we're discussing that?
Yeah, we will be preparing those paragraphs and working with LUC in due course as we approach the proposed modifications consultation, if we get to that stage.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Viability assessment. This obviously needs a bit of extra work, as we discussed, and that's being worked on in time for you to have that. We're looking at changing it now for the SAM work to do with the Up and End Valley gravel pits, and they're working on that at the moment. And then there'll be more when we submit the full list of main mods to you.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah. Natural England, in terms of the mitigation strategy, SPD, for the Up and End Valley gravel pits, we've been in contact with Natural England and given them a deadline of Christmas Eve to provide high-level comments. We've already discussed with you the job numbers in today's session, so
yeah,
that's that one. In terms of matter 2, 5-year housing land supply work, we've done some work on that, and we're looking at a revised 5-year housing land supply figure and trajectory, which is pretty much ready to go, actually, in terms of the delivery trajectory. Something that looks actually a bit more promising than what was in the version that we sent you with matter 2.
Okay, that's the matter we will deal with in our post-hearings letter as to which way we feel the examination needs to go in terms of what the plan should do and the role of the plan, and what we discussed before about whether it should contain a trajectory and how it could be used, etc. So we need to take that one away and think it through.
But would it be helpful to have our latest thoughts on that?
Yes, it would.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just pulling together the work has been done, and updating it, isn't it? So it's not new evidence per se. It's just putting together where we are really. So.
Okay. So yes, we've yes, and part and parcel of that is obviously this table 23, as it's known in matter 2. That's part and parcel of the same information. So we haven't posted that on the website on the basis that it's part of this wider discussion. In terms of the Brownfield Land Register, that has been added to the library. The modifications to include start date and marketing period for the self-build and custom build policy and length of vacancy. That's we're looking at that internally at the moment, so we should be able to get that to you relatively soon. Oh yes, and then was the issue about policy 14, but I think that's partly something you wanted to consider. As regards the issue about providing accommodation for extended families at the Ecton Lane site, I've got a meeting with our colleagues at Northampton Partnership Homes, and also with one of the assistant directors in housing, trying to arrange that for this week. It looks like there's a time when we can actually meet this week, so we will revert to you on that point and the project that's going on at Ecton Lane at the moment. In terms of the site at Abington Mill Farm, 1107, contact's been made with CC Town Planning, and they aim to have something with us by Christmas in terms of modelling how they could provide an access. Obviously we'd need to run that through WSP to make sure that worked. 0171, which is the Quinton Road site, we've got a meeting with the Environment Agency on the 9th of December to discuss how we can look at capacity and deliverability on that site. So we're meeting with Kerry Gins, who appeared at the hearing. Yes, we've put together an open space analysis for each allocated site. We will get that to you shortly. We've done an early draft of the note framed in the context of paragraph 99 of the framework as to the cumulative effects of allocating open space sites against the total surplus of open space. So that should be on its way to you within the next few weeks. We will keep you apprised of progress on the planning application for site 1102. So we'll check that weekly. We've drafted an updated statement of common ground with Homes England regarding the SANG at the site in Great Houghton, to ensure that it includes illustrative material that will form the basis of the master plan. Yes, we've also drafted how the SANG might look on the policies map with an indicative symbol. We're giving some thought to the criteria that would be included in policy 41 to sort of provide a framework for the master planning, including the point about acknowledging the importance of views to the listed church. Yes, so we're going to come up with these criteria and run them past Homes England. On the same site, policy changes have been drafted, which are still sort of being looked at internally, about vehicular access to the site. We've established that the going on to the railway station site, which I think is 0288, we've established that pre-app was submitted to the council in September 2020. We're going to see when the council's cabinet considers the proposal for the multi-storey car park at the railway station as well. So we'll keep a watching brief on cabinet agendas and so on. Okay, yes, we're still going through sort of internally looking at policy 43 as regards the large Ransom Road site and the archaeological assessment. So that's still in draft stage, but it has been drafted. Understand that the as regards site 1010 in the town centre, the Tony Brooks site close to the scheduled ancient monument, that work is still ongoing, and we're keeping an eye on any activity as regards that. As regards the site at the farm in Hardingston, 0204, we've contacted Natural England seeking their views on Bastion's conclusions regarding functionally linked land. Yes, okay. And it looks like we've had a response back from them. Is that right, Amanda?
Yeah. Yes, it was yesterday. So Michelle's from Natural England gave a sort of high-level response saying that can we speak to our HRA authors at LUC to see what their opinion on this is. So I think they just want to come back to us quickly and kind of put the ball sort of back in our court. But yes, saying, you know, the reason stated by the applicant could reasonably influence the presence of the birds there, i.e. there might not be birds there to survey.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And we're still considering the need for a site-specific policy for that site, as you suggested. We're also looking at how to expand policy 13 so that it deals with the sort of particular policies that apply to particular sites, and an idea for that has been drafted up, which is still being considered internally. Also, we are considering, as you suggested, a site-specific policy for the western extension of the Northampton South Sustainable Urban Extension. We need to get in touch with David Locke Associates, and having prepared a draft. So I think work will kick off on that, if it hasn't already, within the next couple of days. And then we're also considering a site-specific policy for the site 1100, which has various sort of railway issues, and there's a meeting arranged for the 7th of December to discuss that issue with Network Rail. Yes, and also, going back, we've already discussed the Abington Mill Farm, but yes, we're looking at what CC Town Planning come up with first before we run that by highway engineers. Okay, and in terms of M40, a note for yourselves regarding the projects 1107 could contribute to in terms of green infrastructure. A note's been drafted on that, so that's still going through internally, but we can get that to you relatively soon. We've had a good look at the up to and at least sort of inconsistencies between policy 13 and the site-specific policies, and I think we've got that sorted out, but as I say, it's still being considered internally. We are going to be looking at the indications on our preferred timescales sort of within the next few days. So we'll revert to you on that in terms of our preferred timescales for the plan. So that then brings us to what we've taken away from today, which is, and we've done this in policy order. So policy 2, we need to consider having a reference to beautiful in line with government guidance, and adding reference to street trees. It's actually tree-lined streets, isn't it? I think is the term. Yeah. And the possibility of amalgamating policies 2 and 3, or rewording their opening sentences to distinguish between placemaking and design more clearly. There's an issue about easily accessible as well, rather than, I think this has come up in a number of places, easily accessible, add a few words on what this means, cross-reference it to policy 32. And then later on there's a discussion about sustainable locations and accessible locations as well. But,
I mean, maybe that's something that you can take away and look at in the round, so that where there needs to be consistency between policies, there could be in terms of effectiveness, and where there are distinctions to draw them. You know,
yes, exactly.
But it does strike me that there are quite a number of similarities that probably warrant similar approaches to wording.
Yes. Okay. And policy 5, we're considering whether greater clarity can be given to the term sustainable construction methods. Policy 6, we're considering expanding paragraph 5.29, which is in the supporting text, to the extent of referencing health impact assessment and potential for use of alternative tools, and scoping out exactly what we want from these health impact assessments as well, and explaining that more clearly. Policy 7, it's the notion of having regard to, which is a recurring one throughout the plan or throughout those policies, and considering whether the revisions suggested by the Environment Agency are appropriate for soundness, as we discussed. Policy 11, rewording the second paragraph to make the policy clearer, and that developments in other locations, hotel developments, must satisfy the sequential test. Policy 12, we need to add that this would be superseding a joint core strategy policy N2. And then we've got an entry under policies 17, 17A and 18. How we will assess wind-fall employment sites and what assessment should entail. A bit more on paragraph 8.18. Policies map legend needs updating because I think it refers to policy 18 instead of 17. We're going to consider quantifying employment, land and jobs totals for a new policy 17A, which will take bits out of policy 38. We will put the latest issue of the West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy Annual Monitoring Report on our website. And I think you were asking us about whether we should include, or we should have some thoughts about including marketing strategy requirements as well.
Yes, and I think a similar thing applies to the other areas where policy seeks marketing.
That's a general one. irrespective of the policy area.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are the parameters that you're looking to secure? What
Yes.
sort of things your development management colleagues want in terms of what has been done?
Yes.
Because it would be unfortunate if someone marketed a property for 12 months and then haven't actually done it in a robust way to satisfy your colleagues. You have to start again. So
I see your point. Yeah. Okay. Policy 19, revise the wording of that to refer to, because we talked about having the upper figures, didn't we, in this policy, to do with convenience and comparison floor space. Just something that struck us when we were discussing this was, should it be up to or about?
it's one of those situations where are the figures absolutes? Maybe about might be.
I think that was the feeling we were coming to as a team as well. So yeah.
Because we deal in minimums within the current national policy, don't we, as opposed to maximums.
Yes.
So anything that would be discordant with that would be picked up by your development management colleagues. If
Yes.
20,000 square metres or whatever it would be.
That's 20,000 clearly isn't about 8,900, is it? But yeah. Okay, so we're going to check our validation requirements for retail planning applications, and I think you sirs were both going to reflect on the 18-month vacancy period. Okay, and then moving on to the hot food takeaway policy, policy 20. We're going to have a detailed look at the evidence to demonstrate the link between hot food takeaways and schools, just to see how much we can give you a bit more comfort on that. Policy 21, I don't think we had any actions from that in the end following the main modification. Policy 23, we're going to have a look at the adding the word or after bullet point A. We're going to factor in the have regard to sort of general comment, and then definition, yes, right, definition, that's what EFN means, yes. Add the definition of a sports facility and playing pitches in the glossary. There was a D missing. In policy 24, we're going to signpost what's meant by a sustainable location, or as we say, or perhaps use accessible location instead, and also look at the repetition in paragraphs 1 and 2 and try and rationalise that. Policy 27. I think the discussion was whether we should add reference to SANGs in this policy or in policy 30. But we will consider that either way. Policy 29B needs a have regard to. And we are going to look at removing the reference to the Upper Nen Valley gravel pits adverse effects. Policy 30 also has a having regard to, and we're going to add some clarity on the wintering bird surveys as well. As regards policy 31, yes, it's a case of having regard to historic England best practice. And then policy 32, we'll look at the duplication that there is between those two separate paragraphs on travel plans. And yes, we'll flesh out what I trailed in the discussion about electric vehicle charging point provision and producing an Appendix 1, having liaised with Home Builders Federation. Policy 34, similarly, there's a having regard to, and in relation to the low emission strategy, so we'll look at that. Policy 35, I'm going to delete the reference to electric vehicle charging points because that's all now going to be in 32. And having regard to the principles set out in the parking standards SPD will be incorporated. And then finally, policy 36, we're going to investigate a bit more, is the policy necessary in relation to Part R of the building regulations?
Okay.
I think that certainly picks up everything I've got on my notes.
Good.
Yeah, and me. Good. Okay, so what happens next is that I think we'll start drafting our post-hearings advisory letter.
Yes.
There will be some of the things we'll need to wait for
Yes.
in amongst this. Most of these things you've outlined are matters that can be dealt with through the main preparation, main modifications. Should we formally invite you to do that? But there's no reason why that you couldn't continue to prepare main modifications and update the schedule. But I'll add the awful phrase "at your own risk" because we might turn around and and say that you need to do other things. But there's no reason why you couldn't continue to do that and provide an up-to-date schedule, so it's there. There are a few issues I think that we need clarity on, and I think the main one of which will be the SPD to do with the SPA, really, and how that's coming together, and the timing of that in relation to going forward. We need to think about when we can issue a letter. Do we wait until we get everything we need, or do we actually invite you to do some of these things in this list, in the letter? We need to take a view on that. And what we don't want is to issue 2 letters, ideally, but then we don't want things to be held up either. So we will need to have a think about what we're going to do. And the other thing that we would need to do, when you're preparing additional notes, certainly base it upon the evidence base that's there. We're not inviting preparation of new evidence at this point in time, but we would need to think about whether there should be an opportunity for people to comment. So that should there be anything that comes up that is beyond what people have already had access to in terms of fairness?
Yeah, I understand.
An example could be the open space assessments. We have representatives who have made comments about development of open space, and depending on what you produce, we will need to take a view on whether we should let them have an opportunity to comment before any main modifications stage. Okay, so we'll just need to bear that in mind, just applying the Frank's principles. But there will be, of course, assuming we conclude that the plan can progress to main modifications, there will be that formal opportunity for people to comment, though it is an opportunity sort of to the end of the process, and I always like to get things sorted out as far as you can before that stage, to avoid doing that stage twice, or even having further hearings or whatever. I'd rather get that stuff done before you go to the formal stage of main modifications.
Okay,
so the number of things here, we're certainly not going to see this side of Christmas. I think we both of us have some time available in the next couple of weeks around other things to progress things as far as we can. And we just need to take a view on, do we actually get the letter done and issue that? Or are there things we really need further information on at that point in time? So we just need to form a view on that and look at it in the round, and think about the key things, and actually we could produce a letter that just focuses on the handful of the key things in the examination. We want to comment on that.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So we will appraise you via Mr. Kemp.
Thank
on
you.
that, and continue feeding the information through,
We will.
and we will. Certainly all the notes we need to go on the examination websites are available for all to see, but the work on preparing main modifications can stay separate. And there's no need to publish an updated schedule, because that is work in progress, and there will be numerous iterations of various parts of it before the final version is reached. And it's better not to have too many different versions of it out and about, I think.
Okay.
Okay. Hello.
We're happy to progress the motive that we already have from the quorum, as you said, it's our risk. Have you got a date in mind when you'd like to see a reasonably, obviously still subject to change, but reasonably consolidated version? Or should we just send one in when we're reasonably...
Well, I think if we take things through, I think we've already sort of intimated that we want to see progress on the preparation of the SPD, for it to go out to consultation, so that, because that in our minds is going to help us shape what goes into the main modifications and how policies are worded, on where we actually end up with that. So it's a parallel process. I think that the main modifications need to come together at the point when the SPD would be adopted, if that's the route beyond, because then you will be in a position to do the updated HRA and the sustainability appraisal and pull all of that together for the consultation. So I think we were talking about April, weren't we, for things to come together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the trajectory, and hopefully there won't be too much change in terms of national policy and other things that crop up in between. But again, we'll just have to deal with it if it happens, and if and when it happens. Particularly any changes to the building regulations that could change the need for some of the policies we talked about today.
Absolutely.
Because that's going to happen, it's just a case of when it's going to happen. And hopefully it happens before we get to main modifications. Yeah, so I think a parallel process, but I think we would rather review that and any additional modifications in one go. I think that's probably better to do it rather than to keep looking at sort of small bits of it beforehand. I think it's more efficient for us to do it in one go.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I think, have you got any other points or questions before we draw things to a close?
Not at this stage, sir, but I'm looking around at colleagues in case anything's popped into their minds. No, sir.
Okay, well, thank you to everyone for the contributions, including the people that aren't with us today. Thank you to Ian Kemp for organising these hearings, particularly as COVID-19 has added yet another exciting dimension to this. We've ended up with face-to-face events with some blended, which was never our intention, but it worked, and thank you for organising that. Particularly thanks to the guys who are doing the broadcasting and making sure the IT stuff has worked. That's really good. Finally, really thanks to the council for hosting the event, for providing the venue and making things work in this COVID situation.
Thank you.
And for sort of help and cooperation and help us for our examination. Anything to add?
Thanks, it's been quite straightforward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if that's it, let's adjourn now, 16:25, and the hearings are, I'll say, closed for now.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.